Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to explain step by step on how to solve Eloquent JavaScript's Chapter 2 Program Structure Exercise 2 FizzBuzz. So via your discretion, there are various ways you can solve a coding problem. However, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to cover the ones that I enjoyed, which are ones I found to be easy to read, easy to follow, and easy to understand. It doesn't necessarily mean that the ones that I cover are the most sophisticated solutions, which means the ones that the computer would find the most efficient. In today's video, I'm going to cover three solutions. First is the solution provided by the textbook, where it utilizes the nature of the OR function, where the right side of OR is returned if it is true, aka after passing through the two if statements, there is a value. However, if after passing the two if statements, it's empty or false on the left side, OR will then return the right side. The second solution is the one that my mind initially gravitated towards. It goes through a series of if and if else statements. And then the third solution is one that utilizes the ternary conditional operators. For the problem, we want to output the following result. So we want to print 1 to 100. And for numbers that are divisible by 3, we want to print fizz in place of that number. And for numbers that are divisible by 5, we want to print buzz in the place of that number. And for the numbers that are divisible by both 3 and 5, we want to print FizzBuzz. So let's get started with our first method, or the first solution that is provided by the textbook. I'll write out the solution first, and then we can break it down and I'll explain it afterwards. So / method 1, the textbook solution. Okay. So first we create the loop for bracket let, we create a variable let n equals to 1 semicolon, n is less or equal to 100, and then semicolon n plus plus, and then bracket, and then start with array let output equals to quotation, quotation, and then semicolon, if n remainder of 3 equals to 0, bracket, and then output plus equals to quotation fizz, quotation semicolon, and then if bracket and remainder 5 strictly equals to 0, bracket output plus or equal to buzz, quotation semicolon, and then console.log output or symbol, and then end bracket, and then semicolon. And we'll close it with an array. So this should be the solution. Let's just test it. Counts all the way to 100. So it starts at 1, counts all the way to 100. Any numbers that are divisible by 3 are replaced by fizz. Any numbers divisible by 5 is replaced by buzz. Any numbers that are divisible by both 3 and 5 are replaced with FizzBuzz. Starting with the first line, the for, so this essentially creates a loop to print 1 to 100. So let n equals to 1. This is our starting value, 1. Okay, so just as a review, the for syntax is essentially 3 portions. The first portion is our starting value. The second portion of the syntax is the condition. The loop will keep running until this condition is satisfied. And then third is the adjustment per the iteration. So in our first line, it essentially just creates a loop to print 1 to 100. So then let's break down the second line, let output So this sets a binding, or aka a variable called output. This variable will essentially store a blank, and whatever instructions that we write at the bottom, the variable will grasp at that value. So for example, so let output equals to quotation n semicolon. So for example, instead of like just doing quotation, and instead we used n and we put it in here. So n, and then if we clear this, you guys can see that the fizz and the buzz, it adds to the n value, right? So like what we want is actually fizz to replace in the place of 3. So like we just want fizz here rather than 3 fizz. And similar to here, we just want buzz instead of 5 buzz. So by putting n here, essentially the variable will the binding will essentially add both n to the instructions down here. That's why we just want a blank. So just quotation. So this, if we were to put n there, the output would be, you know, like n plus the instructions below. But what we want is let output equals to quotation, which will equal the instructions below. So fizz. So in summary, by putting quotation, we let the adjustments below replace n. And then let's break down the next line. As we loop through, if the iteration has an n, right, a number, aka a number that is divisible by 3, the variable output that we set up here will now grasp fizz, quotation. And then the ending here, output plus equals to quotation, fizz, quotation. This is the same as output equals to output plus quotation, fizz, quotation. So essentially this statement here means the same thing as output equals to output plus fizz. Where output is essentially a blank because it's set as quotation, and then comma, therefore in that iteration it fills as fizz rather than n-fizz. So I showed this earlier where like if we were to put n in the place of quotation, it shows 3 fizz. So let's clear this and rerun it. What we actually want is 1, 2, and then fizz rather than 1, 2, and then 3 fizz. And then let's break down the next line. The next line is similar to the one above. So let's say 15 is the n. It's divisible by 3. Therefore, let output equals to quotation, fizz, quotation, semicolon. So because JavaScript runs from top to bottom, so if our example was 15, it would have satisfied, or it would have met this if statement first. So therefore, our variable output would have turned into fizz at the first stage. And then now, let me write. So now as we move to the next if, it's also divisible. Our number 15 is also divisible by 5. Therefore, output equals to output plus quotation buzz quotation semicolon, where output has previously transformed to fizz. So now fizz will add also buzz to it, and then that will equal to FizzBuzz. So because 15 is divisible both by 3, which meets the statement up here, and then it's also divisible by 5, which meets the statement down here. The output, our variable output, will add fizz first. So the blank will add fizz first, and then it will add buzz second, and then overall it will result in FizzBuzz. And then let's break down our last statement, console.log bracket output or n bracket. So star quotation. So this symbol, these two straight lines, means or. So console.log, oops. So next line, console.log prints either the transformed output, or if through the iteration it didn't trigger any of the if conditions, it will return n, the number, aka the number.
NANI?! お前はもう死んでいる。
Created in Excel to kind of break down and show what the code is doing. So this is our original solution up here. And down here, I just essentially broke the code into smaller bits to see what each part does. And I just wanted to demonstrate an example for each number that is divisible by 3 with a remainder of 0, and a number that is divisible by 5 with a remainder of 0, and the third example where a number is divisible both by 3 and 5 with a remainder of 0. That's why I only went from 1 to 15, because 15 is the first example that is divisible by both 3 and 5. It would be kind of repetitive if I did it from 1 to 100. 1 to 15 should achieve the purpose of this exercise. So let's run through. So I'll briefly describe the columns first. So column B is just the iterations. Column C is the starting end for each iteration. So for example, the first iteration is the value 1, because up here we set our starting value to first start with 1. And then column D is the condition, where we, in our for statement, if n is less or equal to 100, then we will keep looping. And then column E is the first if statement, where if n is divisible by 3 and the remainder is 0, then we will adjust our variable output to equal to quotation fizz quotation. And then column G is our second if statement, where if n is divisible by 5 with a remainder of 0, then we will adjust our variable output to equal to will equal to adding quotation buzz quotation. And then column J is our console.log output to print our output, and if the output is absent, then we will return the the value of n, which is our number, which is the the right side of OR. And then n++ is the very last portion of our for loop statement, which will adjust per each iteration. So n++ just means that our starting value of 1, or the starting value of n, will increase by 1. So in the first iteration, 1 increased by 1 is 2. Okay, so I'll run through some of the rows to kind of break down what's going on. So in the first row, the first iteration, the starting value of n is 1 because we set it as so in our for statement, let n equals to 1. And then because 1 is less than 100, then yes, we will continue looping. So in the next one, if n is divisible by 3 and the remainder is 0, then we will output fizz. However, because 1 divided by 3 is 0.33, it does not, like, the remainder does not equal to 0. Therefore, we're not going to do anything. It's just blank. And then next is, so 1 divided by 5, the remainder does not equal 0. 1 divided by 5 is 0. So I'll just click on the Excel formula. So 1 divided by 5 does not have a remainder of 0. Therefore, this one will also be blank. So in the next column, what is this? HI. In the column I, it's console.log. So output or return n, which is the number. Because our output is blank for both, so our binding in this first row is blank for both of these. Therefore, so the left side of OR is false. So due to the nature of the OR statement, if the left side is false, then we will return the right side of OR, which is n. So it returns n, which is a value of 1. And then the last part of the iteration is n++. So now our n will increase by 1, which is 2. And then the 2 will be the starting n in the second iteration. So let's just jump to one where the number is divisible by 3 and the remainder is 0. So in our third iteration here, our starting value is 3. And then because 3 is less than 100, then yes, we will continue looping. N divisible by 3 and the remainder is 0. So here I just took 3 divided by 3 equals to 1. So an entire 3 fits with 3. So there is no leftovers, right? So therefore, we will adjust. So our binding output will add the string fizz to it, or we'll grasp and add fizz to that binding. And then in the next if one is 3 divided by 5. Does it have a remainder of 0? No, because it doesn't. So therefore, that's why it's blank for this one. And therefore, when we go to our last part of the code where it's console.log bracket output or n bracket, because on the right side of our OR statement, we did have a value of fizz. Therefore, in this statement, it returned the right side of OR first, which is fizz. And then the last part of our code is n++, which our starting value of 3 will increase by 1, therefore that's why it's 4. So let's move on to an example where it prints buzz. So let's do the fifth iteration. So our starting value is n. N is less than 100, therefore yes, we will continue looping. 5 is not divisible by 3 because, so 5, there's only, so we have 5. There's only 1 3 that can squeeze into 5, and the remainder would equal to 2. So therefore, this will be a blank. But however, if we move to the next if statement, so 5 divided by 5 equals to 1. So 1 entire 5 makes up of 5. So there's no leftovers. The remainder is 0. Therefore, we will adjust our output variable to add the string buzz. And therefore, when we move to our last statement, console.log output or n, because our output variable did have an adjustment of buzz, it does have a value, therefore this will return buzz. And then the last portion is just n++, so our starting value of 5 will increase by 1, which equals to 6. And then let's do the next example where a number is both divisible by 3 and 5 with a remainder of 0. So on our 15th iteration, our starting value of n is 15, so 15 is less than 100. So yes, continue looping, and then moving to column E, is 15 divided by 3 have a remainder of 0? Yes, because 15 divided by 3 equals to 5. There's 5 multiples of 3. There's 5 how would you describe it? There's 5 groups of 3 that can fit into 15. Like, there's no leftovers, so therefore we will adjust our binding or our variable called output to add on to the string fizz. And then moving to column G is 15 divided by 5 with a remainder of 0. Yes, because 15 divided by 5 equals to 3. So so similar to the first one, there's 5 groups of 3 that can squeeze into 15 with no leftovers. So we will adjust our output variable to add the string buzz. And then moving on to column I, where console.log output or n, because our output variable had both adjustments, fizz and buzz, it grasped onto both. So the final output will return fizz buzz because the left side of our OR statement did have a value in it. And then the last part is just n++, so 15 increased by 1 equals to 16. And then this process will continue onwards until it hits to 100, because we set our limit to 100 in our for loop statement up here, where n is less or equal to 100. So let's jump into our second method, or the second solution on how we can solve this problem. I'll write the solution first, and then we can break it down afterwards. / method 2 if else. So then we'll create our for loop first. So for bracket let n equals to 1 semicolon n less equal to 100 semicolon n plus plus, close with bracket, and then start array bracket, and then if n remainder operator 3 strictly equals to 0, and n remainder operator 5 strictly equals to 0, close with bracket, and then array bracket, then we will print console.log quotation fizz buzz quotation bracket and then semicolon, and then array bracket else if bracket n remainder operator 3 strictly equals to 0 bracket, and then start array bracket, console.log, whoops, then we will print console.log quotation fizz, quotation bracket, and then semicolon. Yeah, and then else if bracket, and then n remainder operator 5 strictly equals to 0. Start array bracket, console.log, and then we print buzz quotation bracket, and then semicolon, and then we close the array bracket here, which is fine. And then so usually the format for if else if is anything in between you will use else if, but for the very last one you change it to just else, and then else start with array bracket, and then for the last one we will console.log bracket n bracket, which just means that we'll be returning the number and we won't be returning any sort of string. So I'm just gonna check if all my brackets. So I'm just looking through to check like each of my starting brackets has a closing bracket. Like I'm starting to get confused here. Okay, so this starting bracket closes here. Okay, that's fine, that's good. And then let's go through each of these. Bracket, starting bracket, closing bracket, starting bracket, closing bracket, starting bracket, closing bracket, starting bracket here, closing bracket. Okay, everything looks okay. So I'm just gonna test it. So I'm gonna clear and then run it. So 1, 2, and then 3, which is divisible by 3 with remainder of 0 equals to fizz, which is good. 4, and then 5 divided by 5, remainder of 0 equals to buzz. Okay. And then 15, FizzBuzz. Okay, sweet. And it prints to 1 to 100. Okay. Up here, the reason why I used, placed if n remainder operator 3 and n remainder operator 5 strictly equals to 0 is because JavaScript runs top to bottom, and therefore this code needs to go first because it takes precedence. If we don't put this condition first, for example 15, e.g. 15 will show fizz instead of FizzBuzz. So we want, like, this is the most specific case. This is the most narrow kind of condition. So we want to place that first, and then as we move downwards, will essentially kind of capture. So the very last part should be like an instruction that captures the leftovers, the remainder of whatever. So it should go from the most specific condition all the way to like a broad kind of condition to capture the leftovers. Let's say the console.log fizz was first. 15 would return fizz because it's the first one that JavaScript would read, and it's the first one that it would return console.log fizz, and it would completely ignore FizzBuzz. That's why we want to put this FizzBuzz, which is the most specific condition, at the very top. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let me just write that down. So start from the most specific condition at the top and then move towards less specific at the bottom, so that the bottom code will essentially capture or acts as a fishing net to capture any leftovers or remaining values that doesn't fit in the conditions set above. So that the bottom code will essentially capture So I guess for this, I can place it... Essentially, this else statement at the bottom is what I'm describing here. So that the bottom code will essentially capture or acts as a fishing net to capture any leftovers or remaining values that doesn't fit in the conditions set above. So like if, as this loops through and it goes through each of these if statements, and if it doesn't meet fizz or buzz, then essentially this last one, all other numbers will return n, which is the number.
NANI? お前はもう死んでいる.
And to help visualize our second method, I've also broke it down on Excel. So this is our solution that was used on rep.it. And then for down here, I just essentially broke down into smaller parts of what each of the code does. So column B is the iterations, and again, I just used an example from 1 to 15 because it demonstrates an example for each of the conditions. Remainder operator of 3, remainder operator of 5, and remainder operator of both 3 and 5. So then column C is the starting n value for each iteration, and then column D is the condition. Column E is the last part of the loop where n increases by 1. And then column F to G is our first test, which is here. If n remainder operator of 3 and n remainder operator of 5 both strictly equals to 0, then console.log FizzBuzz. And then our second test is here. Else if n remainder operator of 3 strictly equals to 0, then we will console log fizz, the string fizz. And then our third test is here. Else if n remainder operator 5 strictly equals to 0. Well, right now I just put equal, but you can. It's better to use 3 equal signs, which means strictly equals. Right now, I guess I had a typo. So like right now, the code will still work. It's just when I was printing it out on Excel, I didn't use strictly equal, but like this should work as well. Like 2 equal signs should work as well. But I think it's better practice to use strictly equal, but I just want to point that out. Anyway, so third test, yeah, so if the n value, remainder operator 5 strictly equals to 0, then we will console log and print out buzz. And then any leftovers is this statement here, the else statement, to console log n, which will return the number. So, and then in column M is essentially what the ending result would look like. So let's go through some of the rows. So with the first row, first iteration, our starting value of n is because in our for statement, we let n equals to 1, so that's our starting value, 1. 1 is, so comparing against the condition, 1 is less than 100, so yes, we will continue the loop. The n++, that will be like at the very end. So let's just go through the first test. If n remainder operator of 3 and n remainder operator 5 equals to 0, then we will console log FizzBuzz. However, one does not have a remainder of 0 when divided by 3 or 5, so therefore it doesn't trigger the first test. So essentially, I just wrote move to the next test. So in our next test, same thing. 1 divided by 3 does not have a remainder of 0, so we will also move to the next test, which is the third test, where 1 is also not 1 divided by 5 does not have a remainder of 0. Therefore, we will also move to the next test. Therefore, it's since it doesn't meet any of those 3 tests, it will just console log the value of n, which is 1. So in our first iteration, the result is just 1. So let's go to an example where the number is divisible by 3 and has a remainder of 0. So in our third iteration, our starting value of n is 3. And then because 3 compared against our condition is less than 100, then yes, we will continue looping. So in our first test, the number has to be both divisible by 3 and 5 with a remainder of 0 to print FizzBuzz. So although 3 is divisible by 3 and equals to 0, it doesn't meet the second portion of this test where it also needs to be divisible by 5. So therefore, in our third iteration, no, it does not trigger the first test, so we will move on to the next test. In the second test, where our n value of 3 is divisible by 3 with a remainder of 0, we will print fizz. So because it meets the second test, it skips the third test, it skips the leftovers, and it goes straight to an ending result of fizz. So you can see how I drew a red arrow. That just means that, oh, it met the second test, and we will console log that result. So, and then we'll do an example of one that is divisible by 5. So in the fifth iteration, starting n is 5, right? And 5 compared to 100, it is less than 100. So then yes, we will continue looping. And then again, this just happens that the n will increase by 1 for the next loop. So let's go through the first test. Is 5 divisible both by 3 and 5 with a remainder of 0? No, it only meets half of the test. So then we will move to the next test. Is 5 divisible by 3 with a remainder of 0? No, so we will move to the next test. So once we move to the third test, if n divisible by 5, so is our n value of 5 is divisible by 5 with a remainder of 0? Yes. Therefore, we will console log buzz, and therefore we will skip the leftovers, we will skip this next test, and then it'll go straight to the ending result of buzz. And then if we move to the 15th iteration, where the starting value of n is less than 100, then yes, we will continue looping. So in the first test, is our n value of 15 both divisible by 3 and 5 equal to 0? Yes. So therefore, we will console log FizzBuzz. And because it triggered the first test, it will skip, because as I was saying before, because JavaScript moves from top to bottom, since in our very first test, it triggered and console log FizzBuzz, it'll skip the second test, the third test, and any leftovers, and it'll go straight to the ending result of FizzBuzz. So our ending result will be 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, fizz, 7, 8, FizzBuzz, 11, fizz, 13, 14, FizzBuzz. Okay, so let's move on to our third method, or the third solution on how we can solve this problem. So method 3, using ternary operators. So I'll write out the code first, and then we can go through and break down the code afterwards. For bracket let n equals to 1, semicolon, n less or equal to 100, semicolon, n plus plus, bracket, and then console.log, bracket, so bracket n, remainder operator of 3 strictly equals to 0. and then question mark, quotation fizz, fizz, and then colon, quotation, quotation, and then close a bracket plus bracket n, remainder operator of 5 strictly equals to 0, question mark, quotation, buzz, quotation, and then colon, quotation, quotation, and then or, and then n, and then close a bracket. And then let's test to see if I wrote that correctly. So it runs to 100, and then 1, 2, 3 is replaced by fizz, 4, 5 is replaced by buzz, and then 15 is replaced by FizzBuzz. Okay. So let's break this down. Okay. So as a review, the ternary, the conditionary, ternary operator syntax is condition, and then question mark if true, colon if false. So in the ternary operator, the condition is set here. So for example, up here, this is our condition. If n, remainder operator of 3 strictly equals to 0, this is the condition. Then it's separated by question mark, and then the next portion is it returns, if true, then it returns this value, and then colon, and then if it's false, then it returns this value. So the ternary operator contains 3 portions, and the syntax is condition, question mark, if true, colon, if false. So let's run through an example. So let's say we're on the second iteration and n equals to 2. This would be console.log. Okay, so if n is 2, so we'll go through the code. So if 2 remainder operator 3 strictly equals to 0, no, it does not. It will return, because it does not meet the condition, it will return this quotation, quotation, right? And then we'll move on to the next one. 2 remainder operator 5 strictly equals to 0. No, 2 divisible by 5 will not have a leftover, or will not have remainder of 0. Therefore, it will return false, which is the bracket, quotation, quotation here. So it'll be quotation, quotation, plus quotation, quotation. So it'll essentially look like that. So console.log empty string, which is false, empty string, or n. So empty string counts as false, therefore this returns the value on the left n, which is 2. So essentially this example here is what would have occurred for this value 2 in this output. And then let's run through an example, let's say 15. So for example, e.g. if n was 15, so let's say on our 15th iteration, console.log. Okay, so if n was 15, remainder operator of 3, the leftover would be 0, because 15 divided by 3 equals to 5. So there's 3 groups. There's 3 entire groups of 5 that will make up 15, and there's no leftovers. It does equal to 0. The remainder does equal to 0. So because it's true, and a ternary operator, because it's true, it will trigger or return fizz. So fizz, and then moving to the second statement, 15 remainder operator 5 does equal to 0 because 15 divided by 5 equals to 3. So there's 5 groups of 3 that makes up 15, and there's no leftovers. So therefore the remainder is 0. Therefore, because it is true, it does meet the condition, it will return buzz. So quotation, so it'll be add quotation buzz quotation and then or n. Console.log. So essentially it will look like fizz buzz or n. And as previously explained, due to the nature of our or function, it will, if it's true, then it will return the value on the left. So FizzBuzz counts as true, therefore this returns the string FizzBuzz. In short, what this solution or method does is, it looks like this: console.log bracket, and then bracket ternary plus ternary, bracket or, and then n. So the solution is essentially one big or function. The syntax for or is or if true, if false. So the syntax for or is that if true, if false. So in console.log, we're using the or function. So this is if true and this is if false. So in the if true segment, it contains two, it's essentially two statements contained within a statement. So within the or function, there's, for the if true segment, there's two tests which uses ternary operators. So in these two ternary operators, if one of them does return true, then due to the nature of or, it will return the left side first, so the true value. However, if both ternary operators do not, if they're false and they don't return anything, then the or function will opt for n, which is just the number. So in summary, or in short, that's essentially what solution 3 does. It's console.log bracket, and then has a if true made up of two ternary operators, and then or return n, the number.
If you guys found this video useful, because the video did take time and effort to create, I would definitely appreciate if you could give it a like. And if there's something that you did not like or did like, let me know in the comments below so I can use your feedback to make adjustments for future videos. And if you guys do want to tune in for videos that you might find useful in the future, feel free to subscribe. Thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video.